Week 11 of the fantasy football season. He has wide receivers start sits every matchup this week. Washington Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles. Terry McLaurin, he's a start each and every week. Easily the number one target in the passing game for Jaden Daniels and this Commander team. McLaurin, he can run all the routes. Him and Daniels have a great rapport. And this is why this Commander team is one of the best teams in the NFC this season. So this week in a matchup, beatable secondary, even though this Eagle defense has definitely improved over the last few weeks. He's a start. Noah Brown, a sit. He had a couple good games here and there. It was Noah Brown, including that game-winning Hail Mary catch touchdown versus the Chicago Bears a few weeks ago. But besides that, we haven't seen much out of Noah Brown. He dropped a touchdown in the back of the end zone last week as well. And this week, he's a sit. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, their starts each and every week. A.J. Brown was banged up going into Week 11 with a knee injury, but he overcame it, went over 100 yards at the Dallas Cowboys, and he's locked in as a top 5, top 6 receiver weekly at the position. Devonta Smith, it was a down game for him, but we know with Devonta Smith, you're going to get those boom or bust games where you just got to ride it out with Smith because his upside is too good to have him on your bench unless obviously you're loaded at the wide receiver position or if he went on a huge drought. But Devonta Smith, it seems like every other week he has that good ball game. So this week he will be in line to have a good one. Indianapolis Colts at the New York Jets. Touchdowns, he's a start. He's the number one option in my opinion in this passing game since Joe Flacco's been the starting quarterback for this Indianapolis Colts. So he's a wide receiver that could run on the routes. He's a burner as well. Here's Josh Downs. And Michael Pittman, even if he does return in this game, I don't think it's going to take much production away, if any at all, from Josh Downs in this ball game. So Michael Pittman, we know he was out with the back and the finger injury, and he's out week to week. But even if he plays, he's not going to be 100%. He's a sit. Alec Pierce, a sit. I know last week he had 80 yards. He found the end zone, but we have to see more out of Alec Pierce, except one good game here and there to put him in the lineup. And same with Adonai Mitchell, the rookie they drafted this season, who's this Colts team. He's a sit as well. I know he had 70 yards in that ball game, and he looked good, no doubt about it, for Donnie Mitchell. But like I said, we got to see a little bit more out of him to put him in the starting lineup. I know this New York Jet defense hasn't been great this season, especially over the last few weeks, but he's a sit. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams both had down games, and the Jet offense as a whole had a down game. But this week it's a beatable matchup. Jets back at home. And these wide receivers, they're good wide receivers. At most weeks than not, they're going to put numbers up. So versus a leaky secondary and a defense that really don't stop anyone, they're both starts. Baltimore Ravens at the Steelers. Zay Flowers, he had a down game, but the upside is too good to ever sit Zay Flowers. So this week, even in a tougher matchup and coming off the bad game, like I said, at the Steelers, he's a start in a big division matchup. Rashad Bateman, Deontay Johnson, the sits. I know Bateman last week had a nice game, 6 for 54, and found the end zone. But that was a shootout where I think this game could be more of a grinded out type of ball game between these two teams. And we have to see more consistency from Bateman. He's a sit. Deontay Johnson, I thought he was going to be this big trade acquisition for this Raven team, but obviously that hasn't been the case so far in 2 games. And he's just not happy as well with cryptic tweets or whatever the case may be. So Johnson, snaps haven't been there. Production hasn't been there. Easy sit. George Pickens to start. His numbers have gone up easily over the last few weeks since Russell Wilson's been inserted into the starting lineup for this Steelers team. And I thought they were playing well with Fields, but this offense is taking a new level with Russell Wilson on the centers. This week we'll see high-scoring game, or like I said, a grinded-out type of games between these two teams. With Pickens, he's a start. Mike Williams, last week he was the hero, 32-yard touchdown, only catch, only target of the game. Still has to pick up the playbook. Definitely someone to be owned in all 10-team leagues. A deeper, I believe, is Mike Williams, but someone to put in your starting lineup after one big play. I have to see more out of him, obviously. And versus Baltimore secondary, I know they're vulnerable to giving up points this season, but Mike Williams, we know throughout his career, he's been an up-and-down wide receiver as it is. Minnesota Vikings at the Tennessee Titans. Justin Jefferson, it was a down game for him. He'll bounce back. It's a good matchup. He's a start each and every week. Jordan Addison, at best, he's a flex option. I like the matchup, and that's the only reason I have him as a flex option. He's only had one double-digit fantasy game in the last month as Jordan Addison, and last week coming off 4.90 fantasy points in PPR leagues. So the numbers haven't been there. TJ Hawkinson, he's back in the lineup. He had a nice ball game with 6 catches over 70 yards, and the production's going to go down with Addison. So at best, he's a flex. Calvin Ridley, a start for me in this game. The last 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had 15 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues, and now he's getting peppered with targets with DeAndre Hopkins out of town. Tyler Boyd's been a non-factor all season long. The tight end position, no one stepped up pretty much. And Westbrook Akeen, besides the touchdowns, he's pretty much been non-existent as well in terms of targets. So Ridley a start, the only target on that offense, and Westbrook-Ikhine a sit. Like I said, he had 4 games in a row before last week at the Chargers with a touchdown. But like I said, if you don't find the end zone, the production hasn't been there. Cleveland Browns at the New Orleans Saints, Cedric Tillman, he's been putting up monster games. I know a lot of it has been garbage time for this Cleveland Brown team. But hey, stats is stats no matter what, and that's what it's all about, obviously, in fantasy football. So Cedric Tillman, Jameis Winston have a good rapport. And Winston, he's going to want to stick it to one of his former teams, going in there in New Orleans and try to win this game. So I think he's going to try to just throw that football down the field, spread it out. And we know Winston's a gunslinger. The interceptions are going to be there. And also we know he's going to get the receivers the ball. So Tillman I got as a start. Jerry Jeudy a flex option. 2 weeks in a row with Winston in the lineup. He's had 12 or more fantasy points, is Jerry Jeudy. And he's locked into a pretty decent contract with this Cleveland Brown team. So the playing time is going to be there. The route participation, the targets are going to be there. And he's more that street ball type of wide receiver anyway, is Jerry Jeudy. So this week, I think he's a decent flex. Elijah Moore had one good ball game for the most part. So he's a sit with Jameis Winston at quarterback. We have to see way more out of him to even be considered a starting option. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had the big game, 128 yards, found the end zone twice on 3 catches, and it was definitely a fluky game. And I know this Brown defense hasn't been good all season long, but Valdez-Scantling, Cedric Wilson, Mason Tipton all sits for me. Like I said, Valdez-Scantling, it was a fluky game. Wilson, he didn't play in last week's ball game. Even if he plays, I don't believe he's going to do much. And also, Tipton last week, he got the start, and he had the goose egg, so tough to trust pretty much all those receivers. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Lions, Brian Thomas Jr. last 2 weeks the numbers are down. And now with Mac Jones in there, quarterback, it's going to be very tough to trust anyone on this offense for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But Brian Thomas, he was a first-round pick. He showed a lot of great flashes and plays so far this season. I know it was Trevor Lawrence. I know he's not 100% with the rib injury. But this week in a ball game where they're going to be trailing early and often, most likely, at the Lions, I think Thomas could go out there and be a decent flex option. Worst case, Gabe Davis, Parker Washington, they've showed some flashes this season. But like I said, with Mac Jones at quarterback, a lot of guys, their numbers are going to be down, and they're not going to do much, even if it's a lot of garbage time and throwing the football 35, 40 times a game for Mac Jones. You can't trust these players this time of the year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's locked in weekly as a start. It's pretty much, he's finding the end zone, it feels like, weekly is St. Brown for this Lion team of fantasy owners. He's a start. Jameson Williams, he returned off suspension. He made some nice catches and tough catches in that ball game. He's a start. This Jacksonville secondary can't stop anyone. And I think Jameson Williams, it wouldn't be surprising if he gets that deep ball touchdown in this game. And also we know Sam Laporte is banged up, and we don't know if he's going to play as well, where there's even more targets to go Williams' way. Green Bay Packers at the Bears. Jaden Reed, one of the best yard after catch wide receivers in the league. So he's a start each and every week for this Green Bay Packer team and fantasy owners. Romeo Doubs, he's been decent over the last few weeks after he was suspended for a game from the Green Bay Packers. So I think he's a flex option in this one. And Christian Watson and Dontayvion Wicks, they're up and down wide receivers with one good week, one bad week. And I know 4 teams are run by, but still it's tough to trust these guys week in and week out. So there sits DJ Moore, a flex option. He's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points in 3 weeks now, is DJ Moore. So at best, he's a flex option. But something's got to give in this offense. Someone's got to break out in the receiving, or even at tight end with Cole Kmet for this Chicago Bear team, and put some numbers up. I've said it in other videos. Right now, the last 3 games, they've only scored 27 points, is the Chicago Bear team. So that's horrible production. Caleb Williams is taking a step back after the bye week. But I think DJ Moore in this ball game, for some reason, if DJ Moore finally has a breakthrough performance, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, very inconsistent wide receivers. Keenan Allen, he had a couple good games here and there, but it's been a down year and a bad year in his first season with the Chicago Bears. So he's a sit. Rome Odunze, besides the 2 100-yard games for him this season, he's been inconsistent. He's had some dropped passes as well. And this week in a matchup versus a pretty decent secondary of the Packers, they're both sits. For me, Vegas Raiders at the Dolphins, Jacoby Myers is a start, number 2 option in the passing game behind Brock Bowers. And when Myers is healthy, him and Gardner Minshew have had a good rapport. And this week, it's not a crazy tough matchup at the Miami Dolphins, where their defense really can't stop anyone. Myers, he's a good route runner. He's got good hands. And like I said, if he's healthy, he's a player that could put up some fantasy production. He's a start. Trey Tucker a sit. No one's really taken over that number 2 role at the wideout position for this Raider team since Adams got traded away a few weeks ago to the New York Jets. So Tucker, he hasn't done much. He's a sit. Tyreek Hill, start each and every week. I know he's not 100% with the wrist injury, but it takes 1 or 2 big plays for Hill to have a monster game. And with Tua back in the lineup and still getting his legs under him, I think as the weeks go on, the numbers are going to go up for Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle, he's a flex option. We know we haven't seen much out of Waddle this season, and even the last couple weeks with Tua back in the lineup. But Jalen Waddle, it's a good matchup on paper, and he's due for a ball game. So I think Jalen Waddle, I would have him as a flex. Los Angeles Rams at the Patriots, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, they're locked in as top 10 options weekly at the wide receiver position to top 12. And this week, a good matchup with the Patriots. I know the secondary played well last week, but that was the Bears. And this is a Los Angeles Ram team where their offense is playing better, and they've turned their season around. Marcus Robinson, he's a sit. I know week 8, week 9, 2 big ball games it was for Demarcus Robinson, especially that ball game with the Seattle Seahawks in week 9. We had 6 catches in that one, 94 yards, and found the end zone twice. And the previous week, 2 touchdowns on 3 catches in week 8. But now, week 10, it was a bad game for him. 1 catch, 22 yards. You know, in that game, Matthew Stafford was off and he didn't do much. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua still got their numbers in that game. Kyron Williams, you know, he's going to be better as the weeks go on. So Demarcus Robinson, I just think it was a thing where he had 2 good games in a row, and we know Puka Nacua was taught that Seattle game in week 9. So he's a sit for me in this one. Ariel Douglas, Jalen Polk, they're both sits. I know Polk found the end zone last week. I know Douglas had a decent ball game, but these guys are tough to trust. This offense inconsistent. I know Drake May's definitely made this offense better, and they've played better football and won a couple games here and there, but still, these 2 players are sits for me. Falcons at the Broncos, definitely a tougher matchup for these wide receivers, but Drake London, Darnell Mooney, they've been locked in for the last few weeks as starts for fantasy owners. London, he's been great with Kirk Cousins over the last few weeks, getting the rapport down, making plays, putting up fantasy numbers. Same with Darnell Mooney. He's got a good rapport with Kirk Cousins. He's a good yard after catch, obviously wide receiver, and a lot of speed out there. So even in the secondary, led by Patrick Surtain, the best corner in my opinion in pro football, I still would start both these guys. Ray McLeod, he's been a decent number 3 wide receiver all season long for this Falcon team, but he's been up and down with some good weeks, some bad weeks. Tough to trust. He's a sit unless you have no options. Cortland Sutton, he's a start. Last 3 weeks now, big production it's been for Cortland Sutton, and pretty much the only guy in the passing game for this Denver Bronco team that has any fantasy value. So he's a start, getting peppered with targets and putting up numbers. Seattle Seahawks at the Niners, division matchup in the NFC West. Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, both starts for me. Metcalf, he's missed multiple weeks, but now after the bye, I think he returns this week. And if you don't, obviously Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett get boosted up even more so. JSN, we saw a couple weeks ago, 7 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns in the OT loss versus the Los Angeles Rams. So the targets are starting to tick up a little bit. But I just don't think that production is going to be that high, obviously, with Metcalf back in the lineup. Tyler Lockett is sit. Lockett, he's been better at home than he's been on the road this season, and we know his snaps are going down as well with JSN emerging over the last few weeks. Deebo Samuel's start last week, he had 1 big explosive play, and the rest pretty much mediocre underneath the type of plays it was for Deebo Samuel. But this offense, they're starting to get things going, even with Brandon Ayuk out. We saw Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, who were mentioned here, both have good games, and I think they're good flex options as number 3 wide receivers, or even flexes in 2 receiver and flex leagues for fantasy owners. So Pearsall last week, he had a nice ball game, had a nice 46-yard touchdown. And Juwan Jennings, he was that nice underneath and go route guy where he had over 15 fantasy points in PPR leagues. So this offense, they like spreading the football out, a lot of mouths to feeds, and I think all these players are playable this week versus Seattle secondary that just isn't good. Kansas City Chiefs at the Bills, the showdown of the week between the top 2 teams in the AFC, in my opinion. Kansas City 9-0 on the year. DeAndre Hopkins, last couple weeks, starting to kick it into gear. We know a few weeks ago we had that big ball game on Monday Night Football versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We had over 25 fantasy points. And last week he had 9.60 fantasy points in PPR leagues. So this week versus a middle-of-the-pack secondary of the Bills, he's a start. Xavier Worthy, haven't seen much out of him. He's pretty much been a deep all or nothing, but the numbers haven't been there all season long for Worthy. I thought he'd be a better fit in this offense, but obviously it hasn't happened this season. So he's a sit. Amari Cooper, if he plays, he's a start. On Coleman out with the wrist injury. So keep Amari Cooper. Maybe they were saving him for this game because the last 2 weeks they've gone out there and they've taken care of business pretty easily with this Buffalo Bill team. So like I said, Amari Cooper, maybe they saved him for this ball game. Obviously, familiar going back to his Las Vegas Raider days with this Kansas City Chiefs team where they win the division and played twice in the AFC West. But Amari Cooper, they definitely could use him in this game. And we know Cooper's still a good route runner. We still know he could go out there and make plays and has some speed. And I think this week he returns. I will put him in the lineup. And Khalil Shakir, any target near him, he's pretty much been catching pretty much all season long, is Khalil Shakir. So he can run all the routes. He lines up in the slot and he makes plays. And to be honest, he's the number one option, in my opinion, in the passing game for this Buffalo Bill team. Matt Collins has hit the last 2 weeks, double-digit fantasy points. Nice deep ball threat, no doubt about it, is Matt Collins. But we have to see a little bit more consistency for me to put him in the lineup. But definitely a wide receiver I say should be owned in 12-team leagues or deeper is Matt Collins. Cincinnati Bengals at the Chargers. Jamar Chase, he's locked in as a top wide receiver and arguably the best wide receiver right now in fantasy football, especially coming off the monster performance, 11 catches, 264 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns on 17 targets. So you're going to get some of those games from Chase. We saw last season as well in Arizona. He went over 200 yards and found the end zone 3 times. I'm not saying he's going to do that here, obviously, at the Chargers. But like I said, Jamar Chase, he's a top-of-the-line wide receiver. Him and Burrow are locked in. And this week, he's a must-start. Andre Aceves, he's a sit. I don't believe T. Higgins is returning. The bye week is in week 12 for the Cincinnati Bengal team. And right now, they're operating well, this offense, without Higgins, and I don't think they're going to push it. Higgins, we know he got hurt a few weeks ago in practice, and we haven't seen him since. So this week, I think he sits out one more week. And Jamar Chase, that just means more targets and more fantasy points for him. Lab McConkey, Quentin Johnson, their flex options. These have been inconsistent wide receivers all season long. I know Johnston's found the end zone 2 weeks in a row, and I know it's a good matchup versus a weak secondary of the Cincinnati Bengal team. But like I said, this team, they don't push the ball a lot down the field, and these wide receivers have been inconsistent. So even in a great matchup, I have them as flexes in the final game of the week. Battle of Texas, Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys. Nico Collins, they activated him off injury reserve, but he didn't play in last week's game, so that was a little puzzling to me. I believe now with this game on Monday night and a whole full week to practice here for Nico Collins, he's going to return, and after a bad loss, winning 23-7 and blowing the ball game and losing versus the Lions last week, he comes back and has a big game versus a Cowboys secondary that can't stop anyone. Tank Dell, he's been solid for this Texan team over the last few weeks, operating as the number 1 wide receiver. Now he'll slide in as the number 2 option. He's a start. CeeDee Lamb, I'm still going to put him in the starting lineup. If it's Cooper Rush, obviously Trey Lance, it don't matter. CeeDee Lamb, he's a good receiver. He could go out there and make plays, and he's going to get peppered with targets because I believe this is going to be a ball game. Dallas is down early and often and have to pass pretty much the majority of the second half and the ball game. And Jalen Tolbert is sit. Tolbert, he showed some flashes this season with Dak Prescott in there quarterback, but pretty much this offense is going to be CeeDee Lamb and Ferguson with either Rush or Lance in their quarterback, where I don't see Jalen Tolbert much being a factor. That's wide receiver start sit every matchup for week 11 of the fantasy football season.